Hello everyone, I hope you had a great week. So we just finished out Module 6. We completed our embedded opportunities, looking for those opportunities in the classroom for the little ones to really be able to work on those goals that we set for them. So we were looking at the environment, we were looking at the social development aspect. So there was lots of things that we looked at with our individual case study child. So hopefully that was able to help you get a bigger understanding or a deeper understanding of using your environment to really help you support that child to think about all the things that you need to be putting in place and all those opportunities throughout your routine through the day that you can help that child, and where could we fit, what can we do during math to support them for this goal, or during specials, or when you go out to play, or when we're having lunch or snack or morning meetings. So all those things we got to really look at how we support the child. So now we're really looking at the inclusive classroom, right? So when we're looking at Module 7, which is our last module that we're working on, we really look and reflect on what we're doing as a teacher, right? So this is the last module to really wrap us up. And this is the last work you're going to have with your individual case study child. So this is titled The Role of the Teacher. What this is really looking at is like personal characteristics, your knowledge of your content that you're teaching, of the standards from NAEYC, your responsibilities, what resources you have available to you, and really what you know, and collaborating with others in inclusive settings. Okay, so this is all the things that you've learned up to this point have been your building blocks to your knowledge. And really looking at the inclusive classroom of working with those students with disabilities, right? So looking at any challenges and issues we have. We also look at professionalism and doing a lot of reflection ourselves on how we can improve so we can support those children. So with this module, we're going to be looking really at what we call adaptive lessons and what that means. And we're also going to be looking at what you can do to support the child as your role as the leader in the classroom, as one of the supporting leaders. So here's our objectives. I really want us to be able to identify those characteristics that we would find in teachers, like effective teachers, when we're looking at inclusive programs. What would be some of those issues and challenges in the field of early childhood special education? And then I want us to really look at like maybe organizations or career paths that are really relevant to special ed field, right? So when we're looking through this module, I gave you some guiding questions for lesson 7.1 and 7.2. And I really want you to use these to help guide you through your reading and your studying to gauge a deeper understanding. So from your reading, you're going to be looking at chapter 11 in your textbook, which is characteristics of effective teachers. This chapter is really going to go really well with the content I gave you because it's going to really deepen your knowledge of what does it mean to actually be an effective teacher and what does that look like. Okay, so you have your vocabulary, all the things we're going to be looking at when we're talking about an effective teacher and your role as an effective teacher. And then for lesson 7.1, like I mentioned, are your objectives. We're looking at some personal characteristics, taking a deeper reflection of us. Reminder of why you're doing this. Why did you get into the field of early childhood education, right? And what does your role look like in the classroom? And then we have to look and reflect back on what we learned about your environment or how you support children and what would a good learning experience look like for them. Okay, so this is really going to break down each section. And I'm not going to, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do want you, as you're looking through them, if there are video clips or anything that helps you connect to the material, please look at those. Those are there for you as extra resources, right? Because it's one thing to read something in a paragraph, and think about if you're not a read-write learner and that's not your learning style, it may help to have a visual like this, like a chart. It may help to have, if you're oral, you may want to see something into action if you're kinesthetic. You may want to listen to interviews or read an interview. So all these things that give you really help gauge a deeper understanding and for you to start making connections with this content. Because even if you are not a special ed early childhood teacher, you are going to be working with students who have exceptionalities, right? If you are in an inclusive classroom. So it's important for you to really gauge a deeper understanding. Now, for lesson 7.2, we're really going to be looking at diversity, right? Like the current issues. And when we say diversity, a lot of times people think about ethnicity or nationality, but we're looking at diversity, we're looking at a lot of things. We're looking at how all the students are unique learners, right? So we may be thinking at demographics, those populations that are emerging, such as like poverty and homelessness, maybe those with health needs. So this is really going to give you a deeper understanding into the type of population of early childhood students and what we see happening and what does data show us is emerging in the classrooms and early childhood classrooms specifically, okay? So for our overview in 7.2, you're going to see these current issues that we just talked about and how they're affecting and impacting the field of early childhood and even early childhood special education, right? So think about children who are living in poverty and what are their risks for developmental problems, right? So these are things we really got to dive deep into these issues. You need to be aware of them. Another thing that happened with a pandemic is we just started doing a lot of remote learning or distance learning. Think about that for little ones. Young children are not meant to sit behind a computer, right? So this is something that we see a lot more often is remote learning or distance learning, okay? So then we go into diversity, and it really, there's even modules here that really talk to you about these issues in more in depth. So make sure you look at those as well. Okay, so I want to go quickly and look specifically at your assignment, right? Because this is the last work you're going to be doing with your case study child. So you look here, you have two parts, right? You have an adapted lesson with lesson plans, and you have case study behavior plans. So let's first look at the adapted lesson. Okay, so for this module, you're going to do what an adapted lesson is. So an adapted lesson is where you're going to select one of the lesson plans, and I'll show you just a minute where they're at, for your specific case study. And you're going to go through all the files in that folder, and you're going to try to devise a plan, right? So there's a plan in there for you already. You have to adapt it to the child you have. So you're going to look at their specific goals and needs. You may have to modify some things in that lesson that may not work to make sure you're supporting that child, right? Their goals and their needs. So you're going to only select one of the lesson plans for your child, okay? So maybe pick the best one that you think would fit your child the best to start off with, but you're going to have to look through all of them so you can figure out which one would fit the best where you didn't have to do so many modifications. That's what we mean by adapting a lesson, okay? So for each of the lesson plan activities, you have to have these following components. You got to have a title, objective, so you can have your individual objective for the child in your case study, but the objectives in the lesson plan have to remain the same, so you can't change that, okay, because these are your standards for the entire class, so just keep that in mind. So you'll have your objective, you'll have the standards alignment, so you have to either use the Tennessee ELDS or the K3 standards. You choose which one it'll be, and then sometimes it may be in the lesson. What are the materials in preparation, the format, large group, small group, or individual, and the lesson procedures, and then the assessment, right? So remember, when you're doing this, the goal is to make the least intrusive adaptation. Okay, so that means that we have to think about changes to the environment in the classroom first. Remember, going back to how your environment is your third teacher. So, do any changes need to be made in the environment, in the activity, in the way we do the routine? Do I need to bring in new materials? What modifications are required for this lesson? How am I going to present this in a way that supports the child? And is there any physical assistance that need to be had or required, right? And make sure you go back to look at the child's goals, right? And to make sure that it's the least intrusive. So this is you have some time to do this. It's not gonna be due till November 21st, and it is worth 25 points. I do have a checklist here for you. Did I do these things? Because that's gonna really help you make sure that you hit all the things you needed to hit. And then, of course, your rubric. Up here, just make sure you read this. Each of the lesson plan components with a red asterisk, right? So inside of it, and underline above, right here, can be adapted, right? So you can adapt the objective, you can adapt the materials and preparation, the individual, how the format is, the lesson procedure and assessment. They have to be adapted, but you can make adjustments and modifications. So please read this carefully, okay? I mentioned you had lesson plans. Here's lesson plans. You pick your child, like I mentioned at first. So if you have Clayton, you have 2 to choose from. Tiffany's 2. Maria has 2. Joey has 2. Johnny has 2. Lily has 2. If you go back and look at the instructions, you're only choosing one of them. Try to choose the one that is where it's going to be least intrusive for the child. So which would support the child better. Okay, and then that's the one you'll make modifications. But remember to go back and look at the lesson components that are asterisk and underlined. You have to adapt those, like meaning they have to be in there, but you can make adjustments. The next part of this, it's 2-part. Whenever we're doing a lesson, we have to always go back and look at behavior as well, okay? So whenever we conduct a FBA or functional behavior analysis, we have to conduct a lot of data, right? So this data collection is how we come to our hypothesis, which is the function or why this behavior is happening. That way we can build an intervention plan to address those behaviors in lots of contexts and areas. Okay, so this project is asking you to complete a simplified version of an ABC form. So ABC stands for antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So we look at the hypothesis of function and the behavioral intervention plan. So the whole purpose of why I'm having you do this is because you need to understand that when you have behavior issues, you have to think about why is the student communicating this type of behavior with me, right? So you conduct the ABC to help you figure out what's the trigger for that child. The hypothesis of function is helping us figure out why this behavior is happening. What's the function or the reason behind it? What are the triggers and how are we going to address those? What strategies to use? What are the replacement skills? How am I replacing that behavior with something else? And then what kind of supports can I put in place for that child to have a consequence in place? Remember, we want to be positive. We already talked a lot about behavior and going over those things, right? So you're going to have to complete this behavior planning form. Okay, here. So here's an example of the ABC. You have the trigger, which is your antecedent, the behavior, and then maintaining consequence. So what you'll do is you'll put the behavior that's happening here, figure out what the trigger or the antecedent is, and then what's the consequence when that child does that behavior. Using this, when you figure out what the trigger is, you're going to put a hypothesis of function. This is basically stating why you think this behavior is happening. What is this child doing this for what reason? Okay. Then down here, you're going to complete the ABC chart by putting in new skills, so new behaviors you want them to learn. How can you prevent those triggers from happening? And then replace them with new consequences or responses. So to the challenging behavior, the child will do this. So if they do that old behavior up here, what's their consequence going to be? And then with the new skills, when they do what they're supposed to and they're exhibiting this kind of behavior, what are their consequences or rewards? Okay, so that's what you'll be doing there. But I did want to show something with you and go back for a moment. If you'll look on the behavior section, there are observation notes. So these observation notes are here to help you. Okay, so this is going to tell you, like, let's pick Clayton, for example. It'll open in a new window. So the observation notes are really going to help you see what kind of behavior is Clayton. You'll have to hit OK to get it to come up, by the way. You'll have to see what kind of behavior Clayton is exhibiting, right? So he has concerns. There's two concerns here. Sorry, guys, my computer is a little bit slow this morning. There are two concerns here. So when you're read these notes, observe this. This is going to help you complete the ABC chart. So try to figure out what the trigger is, what the behavior is, and then what are the consequences following. And you need to address both of them, right, when you're doing this. Okay, so make sure you read this completely. If you have questions, please reach out. I'm more than happy to help you. But I give you a rubric to help you with that section. And that's also due on the 20th. Let me go back and make sure what date I put, because I've changed the dates a little bit on these assignments. This one is due, I believe, on the 21st. Yes, the 21st. So you can submit both the behavior and the lesson adaptation to the 21st. The last part I put in there is not due to the 30th, and this is just really going over how you participated in this course, your reflection. And specifically when I say reflection, it's based on, and I'm going to send like a separate video about that, so don't worry, but it's just reflection on your case study work. And the classwork, but I'll go over that, and that will be in communications or discussions, and we can go over that at a different time because you have enough to work on right now. But we'll talk about that, your participation reflection, because I don't want you to get confused with what you're doing in Module 7 with the behavior and adapted lesson. So guys, I hope that you learn a lot in this module. You have 2 weeks to complete it. Remember, it's not due 21st. And be finishing up any late work that maybe you have that you've not turned in. If you're missing anything or you have questions about your grades, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. All right, guys, I hope you have a great couple weeks. And until next time, take care.